Okay, so hello everyone. It's nice to see you again. My name is Pierre, and along with my colleagues Claire and Marie, it's our pleasure to present to you the Oak Ridge Meadow Park, our playful take on the Columbia Park redesign. Actually like to start with a question for our guests, and you need to think about this because we'd like you to answer during the comments period. I'd like to ask you, what does play mean to you? How do you play, and when is the last time you played? And more importantly, if you had to associate playfulness with a landscape, what would this landscape look like? So while you think about that answer, we can give you a counterexample of what is definitely not a playful landscape, the current Columbia Park. Just by looking at it, the flat topography, the absence of interesting features and character, it's pretty obvious that it's due for a revamp, especially considering what's coming. As we know, and as Stephanie explained to you, the Canby corridor will be the site of dramatic and ambitious changes, both socially and physically. As you can see by this section here, the size of the infrastructure around the park is expected to increase dramatically, welcoming a horde of new users for the park and changing the site character, as you can see by the sun studies. So, acknowledging the scale of these new developments, we asked ourselves, how can we redesign this park in a way that welcomes these changes? So to answer that question, our first step was to take note of all the physical items in and around the site and seen and unseen. What's happening on the site, around the site, over it, or even under it as we considered the soil profile and the water table. But then we went on and diagrammed our sensorial experience of the park, noting the visual, tactile, auditive, and olfactive experiences that we encountered along the way. And as we read about the Columbia Park and the surrounding context around it, we found three documents that grabbed our attention and spoke to us. The first one that you see here is the Oak Ridge Social Indicator Profile. And from it, we understood that the Canby Corridor's development will change the scale and the nature of the neighborhood surrounding the site. The next document was the Climate Change and Stormwater Study, from which we understood that the park had to account for warmer summers and wetter winters, among other things. And to us, this means incorporating natural systems to make the park more functional and resilient. And finally, as you just saw, the Van Play doc raised the importance of creating outdoor spaces that are not only stimulating, but that also meet the needs and abilities of the community members. So seeing this, we thought, what if play was the way to welcome the changes that we talked about earlier? Play for us is first and foremost a universal language. It's ephemeral yet resilient, and it brings people together. And to refine our concept statement and further define this concept of play, we were helped by these little characters that you see right here. Please meet Georgie the little boy, Kevin the corgi, Anne the bird watcher, Sophie the skateboarder, and Terry and his daughter. Actually, because we couldn't interview the people in the Oak Ridge community, we thought of creating these personas to help us shape our ideas and our programmatic elements. They look silly, but actually guided us through all the second half of the semester. When we were thinking of programmatic elements, it arrived really often that we were saying, oh, wait, but what would George think of this? Or is there a place for Anne and so on? So silly, but useful. And more than that, with these personas, we made the exercise of mapping play because we realized that not everyone plays in the same ways. Some people like to dive in more in the action, but some people might want to prefer to be more passive actors of play. So we listed some activities that our personas might enjoy, and we placed them on our graph depending on their social or individual nature and their structure or serendipitous character. This allowed us to reach our concept statement. And for us, a playful landscape is composed of three pillars. The first is inclusivity, which for us translate as creating a space that allows all the community members to have the freedom of enjoying and inhabiting the space, no matter their background or stature. Then we have natural systems, because a playful landscape is one that's resilient and that offer ecosystem services. And finally, a playful topography to match the rising scale of the environment and to give the site more character. So that's great. We have our design statement. Our concept is solid. Now here comes the design, the easy part, right? Actually, no, it was very not. It turns out that making a playful landscape is a very serious thing and not easy at all. The first thing that we did was to tackle the grading of our site in order to consider water flows and determining our main big move. And then, of course, we sketched over and over again, looking for highlights or experiences that we wanted to put in our site. Putting everything into one cohesive plan took a lot of team meetings, tiny steps forward and many steps back, But after many iterations and tune-ups, we were able to arrive at a final proposition, which Claire will show you right now.
Great, thank you, Pierre. So that brings us to our new Oak Ridge Meadow Park design. And we decided to call it that because there's this whimsical meadow in the middle of the park that's elevated in a mound, and then these various programmatic elements nestled around the sides. And basically what this does is it infuses the entire neighborhood with color and a sense of play. Next slide, please. Yeah, so throughout this process, it was also really important to us that we considered topography as well as the hydrology on the site and the experience. And the best way to explain how this meadow influences the site is probably through a section cut. So here you can see that there's this large mounded meadow in the middle of the park, and there's even a fun little bridge in the center, with a cut over it. And this earthwork really helps the park match the new scale of the neighborhood. So because we spent all semester designing and dreaming up these spaces, we figured the best way to show them to you would be on this walk today. And going back to Pierre's question about what does a play mean to you, we figured that no matter how you play or find joy, there's going to be something in here to pique your interest. So to start, I'd like you to imagine that it's a few years from now and we're entering the park from the new Alberta Street walkway. This has become a car-free space for pedestrians and bikers only that has an elegant swale that filters and retains runoff from the surrounding neighborhood and acts to create a unified and urban space that directs people from the commercial and residential areas and brings them towards the park while also emphasizing this stormwater management. These are the materials you're going to see on your walk today, and because we have so many bright, sensorial, playful features, we figured it would be best to keep the other materials in the park quite neutral and simple to create this sense of balance. So as you enter the park, the first thing you're going to hear is the distinct sound of skateboards rolling across the ground. You'll hear and see people of all ages laughing and skating through bowls, having a good time, and even George can roll around here in his wheelchair. From there, we are going to move into the hide and seek woodland. This is a place where you can find the wind rustling through the leaves and the light shining through the trees and dappling playfully on the moss ground below. There's people climbing branches, and there's even a platform for yoga or Tai Chi. If you're looking to get some vitamin D and some sunlight, you'll pass through the open lawn, which is full of people picnicking, playing frisbee, and even Kevin the corgi enjoying the freedom of space with his owner. From there, you'll notice the thick grasses that drape down from the meadow that transform this open lawn into a serendipitous grassland. This is really a serene space where there's also Zen sand pits and these stackable rock sculptures. And really what the space does is it lets you shape your experience and create your own park. From there, we move into the rain garden where emergent vegetation sits in pools of reflecting water. This area really works as a place of contemplation and brings the urban edge and residents into the park and shows them how these natural processes are at play. And in the summer, when the rainwater drains away, it reveals these playful stepping stones across the center. After all this walking, you've probably built up a bit of an appetite. So luckily there's a picnic area with social dining tables and a place for food trucks to park. From here, you can grab a hot chocolate and take that to the forested pathway that's lit up with bright lights, which will illuminate a very cold and wet Vancouver winter's evening. And after that, you can go meet your friend at the outdoor theater for a performance. She's brought her child and you guys sit on the bottom step where she can easily pull up the stroller. But you can also see that there's a vegetated roof structure with couples nestled up underneath. And from here you watch a local dance group perform against a backdrop of trees and the city skyline. So from there, I'm going to pass it to Marie, who's going to take you through the final steps of our walk.
Thank you, Claire. So onto the meadow. Now this is our big move of the entire park. Not only is it centrally located, but it's a totally different color palette from the rest of the landscape. So we really went for rich purples and pinks. We elevated the entire space. It separates more of the serendipitous and free play from the more structured play of the skate spot and the playground. And the materiality of the surfaces change as you enter the space, transitioning to a boardwalk from otherwise paved surfaces. The color palette is a split complementary color of pinks, purples, and blues with a bit of orange that are complemented with yellow-green. We merged and unified the colors with different varieties of similar plants, so combining colors and flower form. We have 5 different echinaceas, 4 salvias, and lots of fritillarias. In playing with topography, we really wanted to bring that in to the meadow, not just a flat meadow, but we raised areas and we lowered areas to give that undulation and that sense of enclosure so you don't feel like you're just in a fishbowl. This also, of course, we needed to take in consideration of water levels. So we put more drought tolerant plants at the top and those that are a little bit more moisture loving down at the bottom of these mounts. We of course want this to be multi-sensorial landscape as well. So we focused on touch and sound, the attraction of insects and pollinators, hummingbirds, etc., attracted to the different types of flowers that we placed in the landscape. We also wanted to have winter structure and extend that seasonality, as we get a lot of rain, especially in the fall and the winter time. So we put robust herbaceous perennials and grasses that do eventually get cut down in February, but they do stay robust throughout most of the season. And we have early blooming crocuses and late blooming Japanese anemones to really extend that bloom time. So here you can see Anne sitting on a bench surrounded by lovely scents of rosemary, lavender, and sage. And you can see all the nice vibrant colors that we have throughout the landscape. Now, our planting plan consisted of larger blocks or drifts further away from the pathways, and then finer details close to the pathways. And you'll notice that there are areas of slightly more saturated colors that you have to take off. You have to go off the main path onto the side routes in order to discover, these plants. So you get a little bit of exploration reward for exploring further into the landscape. So onto the multisensorial playground. This again, we wanted to play with topography. So we have play mounds, slides that go down through the gateway cut. And we also wanted to activate the landscape through rain. So we have rain activated sculptures that capture the rain and make sounds as they capture more of the water. We have permeable paving through the landscape. That's a bit of a riff off of the life-size chess and checkerboards. And here you can see it activated in rain, these rain trees that capture the water, make sounds as they release the cups that they've captured the water in. And there's something here for everyone, even if it's raining. The inclusivity and the natural systems capture and flow the water through the landscape. So we hope we were able to invoke a sense of freedom and joy in the plants, and materials that we've shown you today. And we'd like to especially thank Daniel and Stephanie for your time and guidance these last few months. Thank you.